Hey guys, welcome back to a history lesson. Looks like this is going to be our new classroom for a while. So let's get ready for some new content and a few bad jokes. Feel free to include your own personal eye rolls at any time, but it's actually going to be pretty nice because I won't be able to see them. So where we last left off was this period of history after World War II, where there's a lot happening in the world in a lot of different places, but at exactly the same time. We just witnessed a communist revolution in China, led by Mao, that resulted in tens of millions of deaths, a poor economy, and a China that was lagging behind the rest of the world. After his death, we saw the emergence of Deng Xiaoping, who, like Mikhail Gorbachev in Russia, introduced elements of the Western world into their communist society. Economically, this was great. Politically, it was limiting. Remember, there was still no voting. And socially, it was still awful, as we saw with the Tiananmen Square massacre. But now we're going to move and discuss about what is happening in India after World War II. But in order to understand what happened after World War II, we need to review what was going on in India prior to the start of World War II. Let's take a time machine back to the early 1800s. England just lost the Revolutionary War and lost the American colonies. This crushed the English economy because, as you already know, the Americas were providing it with, say it with me, natural resources and raw materials. We spent so much of the year talking about this concept already. So England at the same time was going through their industrial revolution and needed natural resources and raw materials. They needed to find a new source for these products. We know that they could have traded for them, but it is much easier to take them. So England makes a move and colonizes India. We talked a ton about the forced assimilation, the sepoy soldiers, and using Indian opium to get the Chinese hooked on drugs. What we're going to do is look at the steps taken by the Indian people to break away from colonial rule and fight for their independence. And, you guessed it, we are going to see nationalism play a big part in this movement. So as a result of being a colony, upper-level Indian children were educated in the British education system. Because of this schooling, key figures in India's independence movement would read about the Enlightenment and the revolutionary movements in the 18th and 19th centuries. The Indian people began making government bodies to voice their concerns to the British government. As you can see, the Indian people were separated as a result of their religious differences. Dating back to the Mughal Empire, India had been ruled by Islamic leaders. While the majority of India remained Hindu, there was an increased number of Muslim Indians. Unfortunately, there was often conflict between the Muslim and Hindu Indians, making it difficult to present a united front for an independent India. The one thing the Hindus and Muslims had in common, though, was a disdain for the British rule and a desire to be independent and rule themselves. Well, the British aren't going to take this lightly. They know how important India is. It's such a rich and valuable colony that they are not really going to give the Indian people a say in government. They allow these institutions to be there, but in reality, they have no power. So, with this push for independence, the British are not going to take this lightly. Again, they realize how valuable India is as a colony, and unfortunately, they're going to create some really harsh and unfair rules that the Indian people are going to have to live by. Unfortunately, we see at times these rules were not followed, and what the British people did to the Indian citizens definitely ranks up there with human rights violations that we have seen throughout our course. So what you're going to do is I posted a reading on Google Classroom called The Massacre at Amritsar, and you're going to read that document and then you're going to answer a few questions that go along with it. So let's take a time out from the video and I want you guys to break away. I want you to read that document on the Massacre at Amritsar, and then after you're done answering the questions that go along with it, come back to the video. After reading that passage, it should be pretty clear on how the British soldiers viewed the Indian people. The fact that they were innocently killing men, women, and children for really no reason at all showed to the level that the British were willing to go to make sure that they held on to this colony. The problem was it also showed that the Indian people really needed to break away and they needed to find a key figure, a centralizing force that could unify the Indian people together. Now, that person is going to be Mohandas Gandhi. Gandhi is one of the most famous names in all of history for the actions that he does or takes during this time period in leading India to its independence from the British. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to watch a video on Mohandas Gandhi. It's going to give you some insight into what he's all about. So again, I'm going to have you guys take a pause from our video, and I want you to go onto Google Classroom, click on the Gandhi link, and that's going to bring you to the video. I want you to watch the video, answer the questions that correspond with the video, and then come back here. All right, enjoy. Okay, so you're back. So clearly Gandhi was an interesting dude. The key part to take away from Gandhi is that he practiced civil disobedience or nonviolent protesting. The Regents exam always asks questions about Gandhi and civil disobedience. So in an amazing move, this guy was able to hold a revolution, win, without ever firing a single bullet. Now, he did have some things going for him. After World War II, the colonies helped prevent Hitler from taking over the world. It was going to be really hard to tell these colonists, thanks for preventing a madman from taking over the world, but why don't you go back to being our colonies, give up your lands, give up your freedoms, and give up your resources? Again. So Gandhi was really the right man at the right time to lead this successful revolution, and the British decided to leave India, which is great, but now the Indian people have to try to figure out how are they going to govern themselves. So with the success from Gandhi, which is great, but we have to remember there's a lot of tension right now between Muslim and Hindu Indians. So the leaders of each side decided to create three countries. The Muslims were not ecstatic about this, but this was the decision that was made. So what we had was the formation of East and West Pakistan for the Muslim Indians to live independently from the Hindu Indians that would remain in India. Now you might think both sides would be happy with this, but would you want your family, who spent most of their life in West Pakistan, but because they are Hindu, they would now need to move? Or a Muslim family that lived in India for centuries are now expected to move to a new country, leaving everything they know behind them. So this does not make things easier, and in fact, we're going to see more fighting between these two sides. One of the biggest problems that Pakistan and India had was that there's this territorial dispute over land in the Kashmir region. Not Kashmir like the sweater, but Kashmir was important because it had fresh water and soil that both Pakistan and India claimed as being their own. So as a result of this territorial dispute, there were conflicts that happened between both countries. Now, territorial disputes are not really that big of a deal, or they're not really that new. Countries have them all the time. Best example, just think of America and Canada had issues in the 1800s over where the border of the United States and Canada would be. The problem is that India developed a nuclear bomb, and quickly Pakistan then developed their own nuclear bomb. So now that this rivalry just went to a nuclear level, that really worried a lot of countries around the world, and these territorial disputes or these little flare-ups that happened, the worry was that could it escalate to a point where nuclear weapons were being used. Luckily enough, this has not ever happened, and the United States still remains as the only country to ever use nuclear bombs. But the fact that both sides, Pakistan and India, had nuclear bombs made the rest of the world pay a little bit more attention to the issues going on between these countries, and they hoped to prevent conflict from ever escalating to that point. So we're going to come back and discuss more about Pakistan when we analyze the events that took place in the Middle East after World War II. So we're going to get back and finishing up with India. Now, if you remember from our Cold War Enduring Issue essay, one of the major policies that came out of India during the Cold War was the desire to remain neutral. Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru wanted to remain neutral, which is this non-alignment movement. India did not join NATO, India did not join the Warsaw Pact, and this gave India the ability to trade with whomever they wanted and build their country without restrictions. So, one of the biggest challenges the new government in India is facing is a growing population. Today, India is over 1.3 billion people and is continuing to climb. So, one of the biggest challenges faced by a government is how to feed that many people. So, India is going to launch what's known as the Green Revolution. Now, I'm not talking green like windmills and solar energy. Green in this scenario is talking about food. So India begins to use science and genetic engineering to create a steady food supply. They are identifying what crops grow better and what crops produce more food. Eventually, other countries are going to start doing this as well, but India was really the first to do it. So again, the Green Revolution was an attempt to mass produce food using scientific methods and knowledge to do so. So the final thing I want to touch on with India is their modern economy and telecommunications. India is the world's leader in telecommunications. So when you think telecommunications, think call centers and 1-800 numbers. After the British left in the 1940s, the Indian people could still speak English, and there was a need for new jobs. So what Western countries started to do were to hire Indian companies to handle their call centers. Western countries could get the same service done, but at a much cheaper rate. So instead of paying an American $11.80 an hour, you can outsource that job to India for half the cost. As a result, when you call 1-800 numbers or call centers, you are most likely speaking to someone from India. I bet you always questioned why that was the case, but you never really knew why. Well, now you do. They were able to speak English, they could get paid a much cheaper wage, and Western countries, their companies, could make way more money. So, in closing, India is still an up and coming country. It still fights between traditional rural culture and modern progress. The tensions between Pakistan and India still exist, and taking care of a rising population is always a concern for the Indian government. Yet, they are free from colonial rule, they're able to govern themselves, and that is a key part of the nationalist movements that happened in the 20th century after World War II. Alright guys, so that wraps up India. So please complete the readings and the assignments on Google Classroom. All of this work will be due by Friday. Whenever you choose to complete it, that's up to you, but it needs to be in by Friday at midnight. So stay safe, stay healthy, and if we just follow the rules that everyone's telling us to do, I'll be seeing you guys in no time. Keep doing awesome things. Participate in the virtual Spirit Week. You guys will see some of my creations, I guess, for the lack of a better term. So keep doing awesome things, guys, and I'll see you soon. All the best, Mr. D.